Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Everybody, please have a seat. Well, good morning. I understand that Jack set the place on fire this morning already with his remarks, so he's a hard act to follow. And I'm going to keep my remarks brief because unlike some previous APEC CEO summits where I've just made a speech, we've got an opportunity, I think, to hear from a couple of outstanding individuals. I want to thank Jack as well as Isa Mejino for joining us. And you'll find out more about Isa. You probably already know about Jack, but she's outstanding and I think an example of why I feel extraordinarily optimistic about our future. It is wonderful to be back in the Philippines. We appreciate President Aquino and the Filipino people for their warm welcome and for their leadership in hosting this year's APEC Summit. So, to our Filipino hosts, salamat po. This is my fifth opportunity to be with you at the APEC CEO Summit. I'm halfway through an around-the-world trip to Turkey, the Philippines, and Malaysia. I'm crossing every time zone. And at each stop, we're working to boost economic growth that's inclusive, that benefits all people. In Antalya, the G20 nations committed to take specific steps to boost growth, including investments in areas like infrastructure and small business development. Here at APEC, we're working to deepen our economic cooperation in a way that is sustainable for our communities. And in Kuala Lumpur, I'll discuss one of the most important steps we can take to grow our economies, and that's the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, as business leaders in the Asia-Pacific, you have a great stake in each of these issues. But the topic that I want to focus on today could have a even greater impact, not just on your companies, but on every country in this region and around the globe. And I'm talking about the urgent and growing threat of climate change. A challenge, but also, I would argue, an opportunity. No nation is immune to the consequences of a changing climate. But with its many low-lying islands, its coastal regions that are vulnerable to flooding and land loss, few regions have more at stake in meeting this challenge than the Asia-Pacific region. Now, last year, in fact, the island nation of Kiribati was purchased a plot of land in case its people, future climate change refugees, need to seek safety from the rising sea. And here in the Philippines, you're barely removed by about 2 years from Super Typhoon Haiyan, a storm that claimed thousands of lives and cost billions of dollars in damage. We know that no single weather event is necessarily caused by climate change alone, but the patterns and the science don't lie. Temperatures and sea levels are rising, ice caps are melting, storms are strengthening. If we want to prevent the worst effects of climate change before it's too late, the time to act is now, and it is going to affect people's bottom lines. Agricultural production will be impacted if we do not get on top of this. Economic disruptions, we will be able to price the costs in serious ways. Already insurance companies are factoring it in to their determinations. And that's why in Paris, just 2 weeks from now, we have to come together around an ambitious framework to protect the one planet that we have while we still can. Now, the good news is already more than 160 countries, representing about 90% of global emissions, have put forward climate targets for post-2020. But we've got a lot more work to do. And nevertheless, I'm optimistic that we can get an outcome that we're all proud of, because we understand what's at stake. An ambitious agreement in Paris will prompt investors to invest in clean energy technologies because they will understand that the world is committed to a low-carbon future. That's a signal to the private sector to go all in on renewable energy technologies. And if we can get an agreement done, it could drive new jobs and new opportunities and investment in a global economy that frankly needs a boost right now. One of the topics of discussion in G20 was, where can we generate sufficient demand? The United States economy is doing relatively well, but we are impacted by weakening demand around the world. China's undergoing a necessary transition in its economy, but it means that its growth rates will not be necessarily as fast. A lot of other emerging markets have seen slow growth, or in some cases, like Brazil, contraction. And as a consequence, the possibility for us to start investing in clean energy, power generation that is sustainable, leapfrogging old technologies and getting into new technologies, all could provide an enormous boost, and there is a lot of capital out there looking to invest. And if we send a signal that this is something that every nation around the world is serious about, it can be an enormous generator of opportunity. So the United States is leading on this issue. Since I took office, we've doubled the distance new cars will go on a gallon of gas by 2025. We're producing 3 times as much wind power as we were when I came into office, and we are producing about 20 times as much solar power as when I came into office. Thanks in part to the investments we've made, there are already parts of America where clean power from wind or sun is actually cheaper than dirtier conventional power. Since 2005, even as our economy is growing, America's cut our total carbon pollution by more than any other country on Earth. And other nations are stepping up as well. Last year, renewable energy accounted for more than half of all new power plants built around the world. For the first time, China's pledged to peak and then reduce its carbon emissions. Here in the Philippines, you're boosting wind power. APEC is working to double renewable energy and reduce energy intensity by 45% over the next 2 decades. And through the Green Climate Fund and other avenues, the international community is helping developing nations to adapt to climate change and, as I said, leapfrog over the dirtier phases of development. One of the things we tried to emphasize in Antalya, and what we're emphasizing throughout this climate discussion, is there is not a contradiction between growth, development, and being good stewards of the planet. They are complementary. And we have to break out of the mindset that says that if we're doing something about climate change, that slows growth. We have to accelerate it. And the fact that President Xi and I, when we met, were able to put forward an accord as the 2 largest emitters sent, I think, a pretty strong signal to other countries that we see this not just as a challenge, but as an opportunity as well. Now, the problem is governments can't do it by themselves. The good news is that more and more companies are realizing that climate change presents a huge business opportunity. And we see this in America. Google, Apple, Costco are among the world's largest corporate buyers of renewable energy. Walmart has installed more on-site solar capacity than any business in America. Last month, I announced that 81 companies have joined our American Business Act on Climate Pledge, and more pledges are coming in every day. And these companies committed a total of at least $160 billion in areas like clean energy, combating deforestation, reducing emissions, and water usage. And this progress is not limited to big businesses. You've got small businesses and folks up and down the supply chain who are investing in energy efficiency and clean energy too, and oftentimes they're finding that they're saving money while operating in a cleaner way. We're seeing great examples across Asia as well. Now, the private sector is getting involved in renewable energy in countries like Vietnam. Right here in the Philippines, we're seeing major investments in a massive wind and solar project. So my message to you today is that your businesses can do right by your bottom lines and by our planet and future generations. The old rules that said we couldn't grow our economies and protect our environment at the same time, those are outdated. We can transition to clean energy without squeezing businesses and consumers. When we doubled fuel efficiency standards on cars, that's money in people's pockets because they're spending less money at the gas station. And that's true across our economy. And this is the way that the world is headed. It's going to go in fits and starts. There will be some countries and some sectors that resist. But it is inexorable, it is inevitable that we move in this direction, and I hope that the companies that are represented here see this as an opportunity. Innovators are coming up with new ideas every single day, which brings me to my two partners here for this panel, Jack Ma and Isa Mijeno. Isa is an entrepreneur here in the Philippines who launched a startup around a brilliant idea, which is selling lamps that run on nothing more than salt water. She's an engineer, she'll have to explain the physics around this thing. And I guess you've heard of Jack. But he's not just the founder of Alibaba, a giant in e-commerce. He also happens to be a leader on environmental issues like clean water and climate change. And part of what we thought would be useful was to have a young, new entrepreneur, a young at heart, but not as young, large entrepreneur, compare notes about why they see this as an opportunity, why they think that it's good business sense as well as good environmental sense, and how we collectively can be more supportive and encouraging of the kind of innovation that they represent. So with that, we'll begin our discussion. Thank you.